As the Lord would have it, in His providence, the very week that Robert and I had our first date, I came in my normal Bible reading to the book of Ruth. And I found myself parking there over the next several weeks and just soaking in this story and seeing it through a different lens than I had in the past. And one of the verses that's come to have incredible meaning for me in this journey is Ruth chapter 2, verse 10. If you were to go back and read through our extensive text exchanges over the months, one of the things you'll see often in those texts is I will, many times over these months, just write the reference Ruth 2:10. Now, most people don't know off the top of their head what Ruth 2:10 says, and I can't actually quote it myself, but let me read it to you here. The context is here that Ruth has come as an outcast, as a Moabitess woman, as a widow, she's destitute, she's poverty-stricken. She's now come to Israel with her widowed mother-in-law, and they're trying to eke out an existence. So she's taken the place of a humble gleaner. It's the lowest place on the socioeconomic ladder in the culture was to be a gleaner. You're basically trying to pick up leftovers from the harvest. And she stumbles onto, the King James says, her hap was to light upon a field belonging to a man named Boaz. Well, it wasn't happenstance at all. It was God's providence. But what she didn't know, and what Boaz didn't know, was that they were related to each other by marriage, that Ruth's husband's family was a relative of Boaz's, and that in the Old Testament law that Boaz could be the one to be a kinsman redeemer, to redeem her out of her poverty, out of her destitution. But she didn't know that. She's just being faithful. She's just doing what she's supposed to do to try and feed herself and her mother-in-law. And then Boaz finds her. He takes an interest in her, lots of other gleaners, lots of other workers, but he comes and singles her out and expresses to her that he's going to give her provision and protection and that she's not going to be harmed in any way by the men who are the reapers. And she is in awe of this. She's amazed. She has no idea why this man would take an interest in her. Now, Ruth 2:10, it says, she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" And then just down a few verses, verse 13, she says to him, "I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants." Well, as I read that passage over and over again, I began to feel like this Ruth character in this story. I'm going through life, minding my business, trying to do what God's called me to do, and I stumble onto this field of grace, which is what Boaz's field became to Ruth, a place where I'm now experiencing lavish grace and love in a different way than I've ever experienced it before. Now, let me say, I never felt like an impoverished widow or destitute in any sense, because God's grace in my life has always been lavish. But I began to experience through this man, Robert Wohlgemuth, the love of God and the grace of God in an abundant and different and sweet and precious way. And I was in awe of this. And I just found myself thinking again and again, and my way of saying this to Robert was just to write that reference, Ruth 2:10, on a text. Why would you have taken notice of me? That you would pour out your love and your grace and your kindness to me. I haven't gotten over it. I'm not sure I ever will. I hope I never do, because I think in our relationship with the Lord, it's appropriate that we should always humbly feel, Lord, why should you have saved me? Why should you have given your life for me? Why should you have brought me into your field of grace? And this is not a false humility on my part. This is a genuine sense of wonder and awe that this man would have chosen me to be his. That led to an affectionate name for Robert. My mother actually kind of started this. She loves Robert, and she is so thrilled that God has brought us together, and she started calling him my Beau, B-E-A-U. So I liked that term. It seemed appropriate, and so I shared that with Robert. And then there came a day when he sent a text to me that was signed, "Your Beauaz." But it wasn't spelled B-O-A-Z like it is in Ruth. It was spelled B-E-A-U hyphen A-Z, your Boaz. He knew I was loving the book of Ruth. We were talking about Boaz and Ruth a lot. So he signed off as your Boaz. And I love that. It stuck. And I have often called him my very precious Boaz. And I've seen him take that role in the way that Boaz did in this passage in some beautiful ways. There was one very touching moment. It was before our engagement, but it's a moment at which I almost said, I want to marry you, before he ever asked me to marry him. But we were talking about a hard situation in my life, in my world, and it was it's been a hard thing for me. It's been a difficult situation, and I felt he needed to be aware of it. And so as I shared this with him, he could tell it was a real tender spot for me, and some soreness there, some wounds from the past. And we talked about Ruth and Boaz, and I said, in this story, when Boaz said, I'll take Ruth to be my bride as the kinsman redeemer, he was saying, I will take on all your liabilities, your debts, your obligations, your family, your widowed mother-in-law. You get the whole package when you get Ruth, right? And Boaz, as a kinsman redeemer, came along and said, I'm willing to take all of this. And as we were talking about my difficult situation, Robert looked at me and he said, if the Lord lets us be married, I want to be a Boaz to you. I want to take on your burdens and your concerns. And this burden that's been yours for so many years, it's not going to be yours anymore. It's going to be mine. I can't even tell you what happened in my heart at that moment, because it is a burden I've carried for a long time, and I know we'll still carry, because God gives grace to the person who's going through this. But to see a man saying that part of my vision for marriage is that you no longer own this by yourself. I come around, and remember when Ruth kind of proposed to Boaz in chapter 3 of Ruth, she says, spread the corner of your mantle over me. Spread your garment over me. It's an Old Testament picture of coming under the wings, coming under the protection, the garment of the kinsman redeemer, which is such a beautiful picture for marriage. And so my Boaz, my Robert, is saying as we prepare for marriage, if you let me, if you'll come under my covering, my protection, my wings, my garment, I'm going to cover you. As God covers us with his grace, his wings, his love. And again, such a beautiful earthly picture of the relationship I have and we have with the Lord as we trust him, as we're willing to come under that. Now, if we're going to resist it, if we're going to, be two people just butting heads and picking at each other and not trusting each other, that's no way to have a marriage. It's no way to have a relationship with the Lord. But I see in this man the potential, the possibility of a very joyful oneness as I'm willing to say, I trust you, I trust the Lord, and to say thank you. Humbly, I thank you for being willing to come and take that role, to invite me into your field of grace, to say, I will provide for you, I will protect you. This is so old-fashioned. We don't have this paradigm today, sadly, in manhood and womanhood and marriage. It's just assumed that the two have totally the same role in provision and protection. But to me, this is the beauty of God's picture of manhood and womanhood and marriage. It's not that we're not totally equal, that we're heirs together of the grace of life. We are both created in the image of God. One is not superior to the other, but we are different. And it's a joyful thing for me to now be experiencing what I've said to women over the years as married women. Let your husband protect you. Let him take the responsibility for provision. Does that mean you don't earn any income? No. Does that mean you don't have a job outside your home? No. But it's a heart attitude. It's a way of thinking that he says, I'll care for you. I'll protect you. I'll provide for you. I'll cover you. And you can find a place of refuge in me. And in experiencing that, even to this point, in this relationship with my precious Boaz, I'm coming again to understand and experience a bit more of that sweet covenant relationship with the Lord and what it is to come under his covering, under his protection, and to have him be my ultimate kinsman redeemer.